Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Robby Soave.
And I'm Amber Duke.
Well, before departing the Oval Office, Joe Biden issued a slew of pardons, including one for Dr. Anthony Fauci, also retired General Mark Milley, and members of the House January 6th committee, in a move that the Biden team says is to shield them from potential revenge by a returning Trump administration. Here's Trump briefly commenting on the pardons right after he was sworn in.
Mr. President, do you have any reactions to the pardons that President Biden did at the last minute?
Well, I'm not going to discuss it now. I think it was unfortunate that he did that. We won't discuss it now. There's plenty of time to discuss it.
We're also going to dive later into the pardons targeting Biden's own family, but first, let's talk specifically about Dr. Anthony Fauci's pardon. Senator Rand Paul perhaps put it best, writing on X, quote, "If there was ever any doubt as to who bears responsibility for the COVID pandemic, Biden's pardon of Fauci forever seals the deal. As chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, I will not rest until the entire truth of the cover-up is exposed. Fauci's pardon will only serve as an accelerant to pierce the veil of deception. Ignominious. Anthony Fauci will go down in history as the first government scientist to be preemptively pardoned for a crime."
So this is outrageous. There's probably few, if any, actions Joe Biden could have taken that would make me angrier than this one. And as I've said many times, it's not because I disagree with Fauci on masking requirements or social distancing, which he made up anyway, as he admits, or any of that. It's not a crime to have different mitigation policies than what I thought were wise. The potential crime is whether COVID originates from a lab that received U.S. government funding under his purview, despite repeated warnings and despite the efforts of Barack Obama to stop gain-of-function research from taking place. And this is the key revelation that you've probably already picked up on in the text of the pardon, as other people pointed out on social media. So you can imagine, let's say he's trying to pardon Fauci, make sure Fauci doesn't get prosecuted for any COVID-related stuff. Well, then you would naturally start the pardon in like 2020 when COVID becomes a thing. Remember, the Hunter Biden pardon went back to the President Biden serving as vice president and on. You could also say, well, we're going to give really broad protection to Fauci. We'll start when he's in the head of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases. He takes over in like 1984 or something like that. It's not 1984. It's not 2020. It starts in 2014. 2014 is not a year of a presidential transition. It's a pretty random year, except that is the year that President Obama issued the pause on gain-of-function research. And I know from reading the transcript of Fauci's deposition when he was deposed for the censorship case, that he said, well, under that order, there were exceptions for national security. Whenever we find out there's an exception for national security, I'm like, well, then you might as well not even do it. And he said he doesn't recall if he personally signed off on any exceptions. I don't know for sure. I think this pardon is specifically intended. That's not what they're saying. They're saying it's about all the things Republicans are mad at Fauci about. I think it's about that. It's shielding him from that.
I think that's exactly right. And also, pushing back is further on this confusion about the idea that Republicans want to put Fauci in jail for having bad public health policy, in addition to him continuing gain-of-function research when he was prohibited from doing so. He also lied to Congress about it.
Yes.
On at least one occasion, claiming that what he was doing, or what he was funding rather, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology did not constitute gain-of-function research.
The semantics argument of all semantics arguments.
Silver-tongued Fauci. And also deliberately used private email addresses, according to testimony and emails from one of his closest aides, in order to avoid FOIA requests, so that his emails would not get out to the public through a FOIA request. So those two things, both illegal as well. This is not about him having bad lockdown policy, although he deserves to be held accountable for that in different ways.
Yes.
But in specific relation to prison time, it's very specific criminal activity that he is accused of.
And either way, we need to get to the bottom of this. That's what so frustrates me about people in mainstream media circles right now who are ignoring this story, or just frankly misunderstanding or willfully misunderstanding, deliberately misunderstanding why people on the right, in libertarian spheres, in contrarian spheres, are so like out to get Fauci. They think it's revenge. It's not. It's about understanding how a disease that killed millions of people globally and forced us to shut down and adapt all of these horrible, that caused a crippling mental health crisis and caused a massive crime spike and crashed the economy. It was a once in a century calamity that might have been caused by bad research priorities in unsafe conditions. We might bear some culpability for that, or our officials might bear some culpability for that, in addition to whatever culpability China has for it. This is like one of the central mysteries of our time, and I on like a human level or a psychological level, the lack of interest in that from certain mainstream media who are just, Saint Fauci or whatever, it baffles me. It really baffles me. I want to know. I just want to know.
One of the other really underreported parts of Fauci's tenure and the way that he handled the pandemic was laid out in a Spectator article by Ashley Rinsberg. And he talks about this phone call that Anthony Fauci had following an email exchange with, I believe it was the CEO of Evergrande, which is a Chinese-owned company, where the CEO had promised to make this massive multi-million-dollar donation to Harvard Medical School. But it was right before Fauci started publicly pushing back on the lab leak theory, while privately acknowledging in emails that there could be truth to that theory. So the speculation is that there was a condition on that donation to Harvard Medical School from this Chinese-backed company. Okay, you can have all of this money, which he never ended up donating, by the way, but you have to go out and say that it definitely didn't come from the lab. It was totally of zoonotic origin. So I would love for there to be further investigation into that, because that could constitute a bribe of a government official. But now we're prohibited from doing that.
It's so obvious that there are things here that stink. EcoHealth Alliance, the grant receiving agency or that coordinates the government money with the scientists, has now been prohibited from receiving funding in the future because of their unethical behavior. Like there's
and the
plenty
individual
to look at.
who was at the helm of it, Peter Daszak, was debarred as well.
Yes.
So both him and EcoHealth Alliance can no longer receive government contracts of any kind.
My colleague here at Reason, Christian Britschke, wrote a great piece for Reason about the case against Fauci, which I encourage people to read. He's entitled to due process, absolutely. I don't think he should just be citizens arrested or something, and it would be a high bar, absolutely, to demonstrate that he has any kind of criminal culpability, but this matter needs to be investigated, and I hope Joe Biden's really appalling efforts to shield him from any scrutiny do not prevent the Trump administration or any administration, this does not need to be partisan at all, from examining the origins of COVID. More free media right after this.